welcome back everyone to another video on my channel. Today I'm going to be going through some Pauper decks to beat in preparation for what is, for me, tomorrow's MTGO Creator Showdown. And I need to do some research because I'm casting that event alongside the great Will Hall, and I have to do my research when it comes to MH3, the current metagame, for, like, we only have a few days of data, but I have to do my best here, and I thought might as well let you in on that preparation. So today I'm going to go through 4 decks that I think are going to be the high play. Most of them feature MH3 editions, but let's start things off simple and get to that later. I think Mono Red Kuldotha. Here I'm featuring a list by Boombust. I believe that player 5-0'd a league recently with MH3 legal. And what is this deck trying to do? Also, I've played this deck on my channel before. I even have a rerun of a all the way to a final split. So I can link to that in the comments, I guess, if you guys care more about this deck. I think a lot of what I experienced in that tournament still holds true. I also wrote an article about the deck, so yeah, I guess I'll just drop those links below. This deck is basically about playing a lot of cheap creatures, finishing the opponent off with burn spells. So Goblin Blast Runner, 1 mana, 1/2, gets +2/+0 menace as long as you sacrifice the permanent this turn. So that card is good with stuff like Implement of Combustion. It's good with Kuldotha's Rebirth, where you sacrifice an artifact. So if you get like just 1 menace hit in with this card is already good. Then everything from there is just a bonus. We have Bushwhacker for going wide and dealing tons of damage at the same time. This card is very strong game 1, then game 2, it's a 2-drop that gets Hydroblasted. The opponent might have Sweep Burst, like Electrickery, Dragon Breath. They might have damage prevention like Moment's Peace or Prismatic Strand. So I like this card a lot for game 1s. Tomb Raider, awesome with a Great Furnace opener, but even just if you draw it a little bit later, it's going to be a 2/2 with haste. Very, very strong. Same philosophy as the Blast Runner. If you get 1 hit in, you're golden. Everything from there is a plus. Then there's Reckless Lackey, which is, it's serviceable. The 2 toughness is good. It attacks through some stuff. The first strike is decent, especially against some of the newer printings from MH3 that we'll get into later. And in the later game, you can, cash it in and hopefully find a lethal burn spell. Voldaren Epicure is like a cog in this deck. Deals a little bit of damage. It's a body. Creates an artifact. It's also a sacrifice outlet. So yeah, just, decent. Synthesizer's a little bit of card advantage. It ups the artifact count. Gives your deck a little bit more durability. Chain Lightning, Galvanic Blast, and Lightning Bolt are like your tried and tested burn spells. Galvanic Blast is not reliable as a deal 4 in this deck, which is a little bit sad, but in longer games, it can be. So you should see this as a shock with some upside. And then Implement of Combustion, which has a similar role to Voldaren Epicure. A little bit of damage, a little bit of artifact count, a little bit of, sacrificeability to get your Blast Runner up and running. The red deck in the sideboard wants to address Graveyard, especially decks like Gurmag Angler, Dimir Terror. The opponent is looking to put Unexpected Fangs on those cards, and then the game is over. So Relic is a way to keep their graveyard small. And then, of course, if you play against like Prismatic Strands, Moment's Peace, like Impactful Flashback cards, there's also a like Cycle Storm deck where it's pretty obvious that it's very, very strong. Sacred Cat is in the format. And the Festivities, kind of, it's a 1 mana sweeper. It's very, very good in the mirror. The mirror is about who can get hits in with Kuldotha Rebirth creatures or deny the opponent of doing so. So yeah, getting a good End the Festivities in is quite awesome. Also, this card does work against Spellstutter Sprite decks and Squadron Hawk decks with Sacred Cat in it as well. So yeah, pretty decent card for the format. Gorilla Shaman and Smash to Smithereens, that's your tools to fight Affinity. I expect Affinity to be maybe the most played deck, maybe even also the most successful one. I'm not sure about which version of it. I just know Affinity is extremely strong at the moment. So yeah, don't leave home without these 6 anti-artifact cards. And then a couple of red elemental blasts to round out the sideboard. It's good against any blue deck, including fairy strategies. It's good against just blue elemental blasts in general, of course. It's also good against Dimir Terror, which is like one of the absolute best cards against you. Big 5/5 that kind of breaks your guys. And once it's already in play, it's very hard to deal with. So having a 1-for-1 answer on the stack is awesome. I expect red to see heavy play, and time will tell how prepared other decks are with incidental life gain, sweepers here and there, and stuff like that. Let's jump on to deck number 2, which will feature Modern Horizons 3 cards. Up next is Grixis Affinity. So Affinity as mechanic has historically been an aggro archetype, but in Pauper it's a bit different. And the main reason for that is we have access to so many draw spells. So this deck features 11 draw spells, 4 Thoughtcast, 4 Deadly Dispute, which is like basically the Black Ancestral Recall, in my opinion, because you buy back the mana, which effectively reduces this cost to 1 mana. And if you sacrificed a Ichor Wellspring, you even draw an additional card. So cool comparison there. Reckoner's Bargain is sometimes worse, sometimes better. If life matters, sacrificing something like Mirror Enforcer will go a long way. But this is basically just to say this deck has 11 draw spells. And so this is not really an aggro deck anymore. This is like a mid-range deck going super late. So let's see. How do we beat the opponent here? We have good old Mirror Enforcer, just a good threat. And then we have these two boys. So let's see. Refurbished Familiar, 4 mana, affinity for artifacts, 2/1 flyer. When it enters, the opponent discards a card. If they can't, which means they're hellbent, you draw a card. So this card is good at any stage of the game, which is huge. And it has evasion. So this card will see a ton of play. I think all affinity decks will run this card. And just another 2-for-1 for the deck. So you can add that to this pile, basically. We also have Sneaky Snacker, which is a card that I did not expect to see play in Affinity, but now that I've seen it pop up, it makes a ton of sense. So 2 mana fairy, flying. Whenever you draw your 3rd card in a turn, return it from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. So that means in this deck, if you just play it out, you block with it, you trade off with it, you sacrifice it to Deadly Dispute, you sacrifice it to a Reckoner's Bargain, then this card gets returned right away as long as it's your turn. Because something I missed initially is, when I saw this card, I thought like, oh, Brainstorm. Oh, Lauren revealed in the late game. But when you draw your first card, that's the draw step. Now there's just 2 to go. So this card is very, very strong in this deck as long as the 2/1 body is relevant against the format. And it will be, for sure. But there are ways around it. I've thought about stuff like, a card like Squadron Hawk gets a lot better. Just think about Squadron Hawk, Battle Screech in a world of 2/1 flyers here. Then you kind of negate their value pretty nicely. Maybe if people play a lot of Suffocating Fumes, they can go get a big Suffocating Fumes and take advantage of that tempo win. But then again, this card's coming back, so maybe this deck is able to grind out even the counterplay. I really like those 2 additions. Also, funnily enough, we have Crockclan Shaman here as a main deck sweeper that only deals damage to non-flyers. And what do you know? We only play flyers here, aside from a beefy 4/4 on the ground. So pretty darn good synergy if this is good against the metagame, which we don't know yet, but that's the thing about these reactive cards, or these, let's call them metagame slots, because Galvanic Blast is always going to be viable, no matter the matchup, and so is your draw spells and your proactive plan. But a card like Crockclan Shaman, that's a bit more hit or miss, so time will tell if that card is great in the metagame. As another mention here, we have the super late game of Makeshift Munition, which is just a way, as long as you have one of that card in your deck, it's like, at least if we're drawing, going nuts, depleting our opponent's hand, just drawing a ton of cards, this is a way to turn a million lands into play into just, an inevitable win. So I really like the 1 copy of Munition, because it's really not that exciting in your opening hand, aside from a few matchups. The let's say cogs of the deck are Ichor Wellspring, 2-mana artifact cantrips. When it dies, you also draw a card. Great with the black draw spells. 4 Blood Fountain here. So Blood Fountain used to be like a 2 of or 3 of, but now it's good as a 4 of because it lets you discard the Sneaky Snacker, and get some free value that way. Also, this card puts 2 artifacts into play: the Blood and the Blood Fountain itself, which makes for like very fast double Mirror Enforcer draws or 1-mana Thought Casts at the blink of an eye. So yeah, very, very important card for, setting up your affinity count. And then 2 copies of Nile Spellbomb. I mean, that card is just an educated guess that, okay, I want a 1-mana artifact to help my affinity count, and I might as well, cheat, quote-unquote, cheat a little bit on my sideboard slots and play a couple of Nile Spellbombs. It will disrupt opposing snackers. It will disrupt opposing, opponents building graveyards or Cogcade decks with Prismatic Strands, Deep Analysis, Sacred Cat. Like, the incidental graveyard hit is going to be nice, right? Affinity plays a pretty good mana base here with lots of duels. As you can see here, this list by Alanan ZEW plays 10 bridges alongside 9 classic Mirrodin lands. And the context for that is basically you're going to be facing a lot of hate, like Gorilla Shaman, like Smash to Smithereens, as we saw in the other deck. And most decks will have counterplay against Affinity's mana base. So we take our medicine here and play some tap lands, but the lands are like they're mana fixing and they're more resilient towards hate, so it's a good trade-off. Sideboard, more of the standard stuff here. Blue Elemental Blast against red decks, red Elemental Blast against blue decks, triple Shaman against Dimir, a little bit more graveyard hate. 2 more sweepers in 1 Shaman, 1 Breath Weapon, and then the 5th Blast here for good measure. So this pilot has a pretty good idea of what to expect. And I respect that for sure. Grixis Affinity, definitely one to either be playing or need to be able to beat if you want to do well in the MTGO Creator Showdown or any Pauper challenge on Magic Online, really. All right, let's go to the next deck here. This is Jeskai Ephemerate. This is played by Mike. I definitely slaughter that one. M-A-I-C. Okay. So this is like the control deck of the format, or one of them, I should say. And the reason why I'm highlighting this is because it's playing some cool cards from Modern Horizons 3. We see 4 copies of Tune the Narrative. So 1 mana, draw a card, get 2 energy. So that's not really like exciting unless we have other stuff to use our energy for. And what do you know? We have Galvanic Discharge. So Galvanic Discharge is basically a 1 mana removal spell that should kill everything in the format, especially when you combine it with the package of Tune the Narrative. So the theory here is that this cost of playing Tune the Narrative is so small that you can take some more liberties with your mana base, and because the alternative is Skred, and I should mention that the alternative is running Skred, and then you need to run snow-covered lands, and you can't really run as many duels as you want to. The bridges doesn't help, all of that stuff. So I'm interested to see if this will be the standard moving forward, or we'll just go back to Skred and kind of move on with life here. It's always interesting with new cards if they stick or they get tried out and then discarded later. I also noticed a copy of Jolted Awake. You can, with this card, return an artifact or creature card from your graveyard into play. And that's kind of cool on especially cards like Augur of Bolas. It's just like on Earth on Augur of Bolas, and then later in the game you can do it on one of your bigger creatures if you have excess energy. I actually really like that. This deck used to run a copy of I can't remember the name. Not Last Breath. It's a 4-mana reanimation spell, and this is the 1-mana reanimation spell. So I actually really like that. That's a cool, and you can just cycle it if it's bad. So pretty cool. This deck tries to set up a Ephemerate Archaeomancer loop. That's like the goal of this deck, where the value is just too much for the opponent, and like you return a counter spell, you return the Ephemerate, and then you kind of pseudo lock your opponent out of the game. Also, we're playing Muldrifter, which is also absurd with Ephemerate, and a couple of Murmuring Mystics, which lines up really well in the format in the sense that once you have that card in play, every card you play like rewards you, and the 1/1 flyers are, I would say, they're premier. Not, and it doesn't make it any worse that a lot of the new MH3 cards are also 1 toughness flyers. So Murmuring Mystic is like the late game card that will seal the deal and that can sometimes stabilize on complicated board states. Yeah, Augur of Bola is just super solid. A little bit of cantrip, a little bit of selection, 5 2-mana counters to, you know, have game against the some of the more bigger decks in the format, bigger spells. Union of the Third Path, just a decent life gain spell to have access to. Kenku Artificer, it's actually kind of cool to see this card outside of Affinity, but this card just basically makes one of your bridges into a indestructible 3/3 flyer, and that's super potent in the format. Not a lot of cards can deal with it. At that point, it's like, you need to get rid of all my creatures, then Edict, or you need to bounce it with a Snap or something along those lines. This card is pretty solid. Also, blinking it with Ephemerate, you can just build an army of indestructible 3/3s. I like that card. Then a single copy of Breath Weapon, which I assume is like, you kind of want a certain number in your 75, but yeah, there was one spot for it in the main deck. Just a very good sweeper against a lot of decks. Cleansing Wildfire on a bridge is like ramp and fixing. A little bit of cantripping going on there. Yeah, this deck is just super solid. Let's see what the sideboard has to offer. So we notice a trend here. The blasts, not many players leave without them. Then we have Dawnbringer Cleric, which is a flexible card to gain percentage points against Graveyard, Mono Red, and a deck like Boggles, or another deck with, you know, key enchantments where that might be cool. You could play like better options against any of those decks, but this is the most flexible one. I really like Dawnbringer Cleric. It's a Pauper sideboard staple. 1 copy of Revoke Existence, which is basically a 2-mana land destruction spell against Affinity early, or like killing a Mirror Enforcer later. It can also do work against some decks like Boggles, etc. 2 Dust to Dust. And I think this is kind of a concession to how hard this card is to cast. There are some games where you simply can't get to double white early, but this card is just so strong against Affinity turn 3, so a little bit of split going on here. And actually, this sideboard doesn't have that much against Affinity, so I would assume the average deck has more cards against Affinity. A Dispel to help against control, but it also helps against Affinity, like with the black draw spells. And then the second copy of Breath Weapon to get to 2. Cast Into the Fire is another one that is kind of like a sweeper sometimes, and then it's also a live card against Affinity. This is like one of my favorite things about Pauper, is finding these crossover cards like Cast Into the Fire, good against Weenies, good against artifacts. Dawnbringer Cleric, good against red, good against enchantments. Revoke Existence, good against Affinity, good against enchantments. Dispel, good against red, good against counterspell, good against Affinity. I really enjoy trying to cover the most bases possible. Yeah, with that said, let's look at the last deck of today. The fourth one here is Dimir Terror, played by Hierro Sale Siete. My high school Spanish is hitting it out the park here. So what is this deck trying to do? This deck is trying to chain cantrips and basically playing Tolarian Terror and Girma Gangler ahead of schedule. This player decided to add the Sneaky Snacker, which is a pretty cool addition because we play 4 copies of Thought Scour, 4 copies of Mental Note. So if we randomly mill these over, we're happy. Same with Deep Analysis. That's like the purpose of Deep Analysis. You're not really looking to pay 4 mana for it, even though it is viable. You're looking to mill it over with a Thought Scour or Mental Note. You have Brainstorm to set that up. Like, put back, it's a very normal play pattern. You brainstorm back a Deep Analysis and a Snacker, unit and Mental Note both away, and then later on this can come back when you find another Brainstorm or are able to chain a couple of cantrips. Or just cast a Deep Analysis. I guess that even works. Yeah, that's beautiful. I didn't think about that. So this is more of me like trying to get in tune with like the synergies. Because I my first thought was, oh, then you already used your Brainstorm. How are you getting back the Snacker? Then you have to cast 2 cantrips, but That's not the case here. If you just deep analysis, it just comes right back. So that's the dream. Brainstorm back Snacker and analysis. Next turn cast analysis, get back Snacker. Beautiful. Full hand and even adding stuff to the board. What I really enjoy about this deck is you're playing Snuff Out. That removal spell is extremely strong. Just the fact that you can use all your mana for, counter spelling or deep analysis or develop a couple of creatures and still have free interaction up. That's just so huge. And it's especially good in a world where the opponent is trying to put, auras on their creature or trying to win with the Monarch. Just stuff like that where the clutch factor of Snuff Out comes into play. I really enjoy that. Also, the mana base of this deck has gotten way better over the years. Now we have Lauren Revealed, which is like your early shuffle effect, duel, puts an sorcery in the yard. Late game, it's a draw 3. Absurd card. And then because it can go and get the black sources here, so we only have 9 black sources in the deck, 4 reveals and 5 duels. But in 95 out of 100 games, we're able to get to that black easily and just play from there. It's so good to play a bunch of islands and not, have it like double swamp in the mix where you want to go like turn 3, angler with counterspell up or something. Like that's big reason why this deck is so good right now. Sideboard looks like we have the good old 4 cards against red. Dispels as the flexible card that's also decent against red, but also does work elsewhere. Then we have a couple of Steel Sabotages against Affinity. We have a couple of Stormbound Geist. This is an all-timer. So 3 mana, 2/2 flyer. Stormbound Geist can only block creatures with flying, but it has Undying. So this basically means if you're playing against any fair deck like Fairy Strategies or black-based removal, red-based removal, this is going to be a 2-for-1. So I really like this card if you expect to play against a bunch of fairies. But again, power creep and all of that jazz. So this card is not the powerhouse it used to be, but it is a legendary card for sure. A couple of Drown in Sorrows. That card got downgraded to common somewhat recently, and even though double black is not super trivial, this card is very potent. -2/-2, scry 1, very awesome if you can pull it off. And here's the 3rd copy of Unexpected Fangs. I didn't mention it, but this deck has 2 in the main deck, which is basically to say, if I put Unexpected Fangs on a Tellurian Terror, I have a 6/6 lifelinker. That's difficult to race because 9 out of 10 decks in Pauper are trying to win with combat damage. It's only the rare occasion that the opponent is trying to win in another way. So Unexpected Fangs, very good against red for obvious reasons when you play all those fatties. And then a couple of copies of Rotten Reunion to kind of round out the deck. So this card looks very weird. So this card does a few things. In the mirror match, it's awesome for 2 reasons, because you can exile your opponent's deep analysis or snacker out of the yard. And this 2/2 you're getting, it's not because you intend on, attacking with that, because that will just get it killed. So unless it's the last damage, don't do that. But that 2/2 insulates you against edict effects. So edict effects are obviously quite awesome against these big creatures. The snacker is also a little bit of insulation. I believe this slot used to have Augur of Bolas, so kind of the same thing. But yeah, Rotten Reunion, you're looking to take a key card out of the opponent's graveyard. Deep Analysis is the best one, but we will also settle for stuff like Prismatic Strands or Sacred Cat or whatever it might be. Yeah, pretty cool deck. This has historically been one of my favorite decks. But yeah, I'm not playing tomorrow. I'm very much looking forward to casting the event and hopefully uncovering a crap ton of details. And yeah, I mean, I hope you enjoyed this video. I tried to do these like one take videos. I could do a bunch of editing. I could do a bunch of other stuff, but I think it's more enjoyable to watch, this free stream of thought when it comes to Magic. And yeah, I hope you like it as well. Yeah, that's gonna do it for today's video. I really hope to see you tomorrow on the broadcast. It's gonna be broadcasted on Twitch TV/Magic Online on the official channel, and we're gonna showcase a lot of creators. We're gonna tune into their games. We're gonna shout out their streams. We're gonna do some giveaways as well, so you don't want to miss it. And hopefully we can do a good job, and you guys get to have an enjoyable Saturday, just like we will. All right. That's going to do it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.